This is the March 6th meeting of the zoning bylaw committee. Start with an alphabetical roll call.
Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan is here. Cassie, you're here.
Cassie Malatesta here.
Thank you. Missed you on Monday. And then we have with us our assistant town planner Cassandra Thayer, Judge Judith Cutler, and visiting us tonight from the Zoning Board of Appeals is Woody Chittick. So it's a short meeting tonight. We're going to discuss the forum a little bit, but Woody had some comments. Oh, and here's David. Good, David, welcome. We just opened the meeting, so.
Oh, great. I just want to let you know before we start, I can only be on till about 7 tonight because I have another meeting to run to.
Okay, yeah, and maybe that's when Jack will join us, but yeah, this will be quick. So let's just, let's go right to Woody. You know, as part of the forum, Woody had sent us a number of comments last Monday. Those were circulated to all of you, and since then, he and Judge Cutler have had a conversation to go through all of those. I think Woody may still have some outstanding comments, and I thought we'd talk about them, but perhaps either Judge Cutler or Woody, one of you maybe just summarize your conversations.
Well, I think a lot of my points were, well, I mean, Judge Cutler addressed all my points, but a lot of them were satisfied in my mind. But I've still got a couple of, and I don't mean to backslide on this, Judge Cutler, but I've still got two and a half concerns, and we can maybe save the big one to last. And the big one has to do with developing a consensus in the town. I've been not through lack of trying on your part, Tom, but the turnout has been pretty pathetic, and I'm afraid that when we get to town meeting, you know, we've had 10 to 20 people attend these meetings, both by Zoom and in person, and there'll be 120 voters, most of whom I fear will be ignorant of a lot of the issues, the whys, the wherefores maybe they can figure out. But anyway, that's something we can talk about. I mean, I certainly want to see your proposals pass by and large, but I don't know what I can do to kind of help, but why don't we just put that aside for the moment? I mean, I think there've got to be other outreach mechanisms.
Yeah, well, you know, we're relying on Justin, our communications director, with all of his young and modern tech knowledge of social media and everything. And, you know, we advertised this on 143. We sent the postcard to every house in town. We put it on the web page. I know, and it's all being repeated.
I'm not faulting this group. Trust me.
No, I know, but I'm trying to think, and you're right. You know, I was very disappointed in the turnout the other night, and those who showed up were essentially the developer community and their allies. So, you know, which is what we need to expect at town meeting as well. But it was disappointing. And you know, again, we're going to do with a similar forum on Wednesday, you know, where we'll be on 3 bits of media at the same time with the planning board. You know, we're coming to see your work, you know,
well, let me, I mean, I
don't know what else we can do other than, you know, mail things to stick.
Yeah, I don't want to chew up time too much here, but back 5 or 6 months ago or a year ago, we also talked, and I'd be happy to do this part. Go to churches. Heck, you can go to the Old Goats, Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary. I mean, I would just try to sort of connect with different constituencies that you know, we're not interested or in coming out. Don't ask me why, but you know, I mean,
yep.
I try to go where the people are.
With the exception of the height change, I think all of the changes I don't see as being controversial. I mean,
they may not be. Well, I'm okay. Well, why don't we talk about
so I think most of them are you know, if there isn't dissent on the floor of town meeting for whatever reason, I mean, if everybody on the boards that, and the votes are clear from the planning board on through to the selectmen and on the warrant, they should pass. Again, with the exception of the height change, I think to me, that's the only big change. I mean, the single lot exemption, I don't see it as being so controversial in that it's not retroactive. It's moving forward, and frankly, I don't really see too many non-conforming lots being created either through the A&R process or the subdivision. Actually, I don't see any non-conforming lots being created through A&R or subdivision.
We have slightly different perspectives
Well,
on that, but let's not.
Let me do this. Let's suggest that,
Well, what is the
So-
fear then?
The
well,
fear
the
is
fe-
people
well-
are gonna come out of the woodwork, Clark, and,
On what in particular, though?
well, I think height is certainly one.
Yes, clearly.
I don't think people understand the single lot exemption issue, particularly with the picking the date of June 2023 as a.
But it seems to be covered in that it's not retroactive. It's only moving forward, and I don't see any, like I said, I don't see any non-conforming lots being created in the future.
We may not be in the realm of logic here. You're a
Oh.
logical guy, you've studied this, but there are people who almost a knee-jerk reaction. But at any rate, I've got just a couple of concerns, and I don't want to.
let me just address that issue though. So
Well-
tomorrow night, tomorrow night is the select board. We have to go through the formality of submitting the articles to the planning board for Wednesdays here. I don't see that there's going to be a big thing with them. Planning, Woody, I guess they're coming to you on the 15th for the zoning board. Advisory isn't scheduled yet, but hopefully in March.
Sure.
So we are meeting again in the end of March. After we assess, Clark, your point about that there may not be a lot of issues, opposition from officialdom, let's assess then what we need to do during the month of April in the lead up to town meeting to really be prepared, because in the fall of 21 town meeting, we also thought that was non-controversial and there wasn't a lot of opposition from officialdom, and then we got.
Well, except for my concerns that were largely ignored.
Yeah, and then we got ambushed at town meeting with a lot of BS, I won't go into it, but again, we can't assume. I think Woody's point is well taken. We can't assume.
I will make
that-
one point. I think that Woody and I sat next to each other at town meetings over the last 15 years, with the exception of a year and a half ago, saying the same things, because we had a ad hoc zoning committee. We thoroughly vetted the language and through the boards, and if there was something that we thought was controversial or wouldn't pass on the floor of town meeting, we fixed it or didn't
pulled it.
present it.
Yeah.
And frankly, I mean, I think that we all have to have respect for what an open town meeting is, and how all citizens participate in zoning changes for the common good, not necessarily in a completely understood way. But I personally have a deep respect for our town meeting process and for the level of commitment that it takes for a.
I really would
zoning
like to park
changes.
this, and maybe I can put some thoughts down. It's really a matter of communication, but I am struck in a couple of venues I've been to at not opposition, but plain good old fashioned ignorance of what's going on. And that worries me, because if people don't understand, it's one thing if they understand and are in favor or opposed. It's another thing if they don't understand and they could get swayed on the floor of town meeting. And I'm just trying to anticipate 2 months down the road that, I think we all could do, I could help a better job of communicating, because the people don't seem that interested. And that's fine if they're
And
blasé.
I agree, and I wholeheartedly agree. And like I said, let's go through the boards in the next 2 weeks. In our next meeting, we can discuss
Right.
how to prepare for this and go through April. I don't think we should just rest on our laurels if all the boards are in support. I agree with
Well,
Woody, and I don't, and then in ignorance of town meeting doesn't serve anybody's purpose. That's why we're doing this differently. We're coming out early. We're putting it on every possible place we can post it to
Okay,
get.
as I said, you guys are
Anyway.
trying. It's not that you aren't trying, but I'm
I know.
just getting a little concerned as the weeks go by that there are people who still don't even understand what you're proposing, let alone
Yep.
they
That's
haven't
right.
even reached the point of.
And it's
of
okay.
being in
They
favor
they
or
may
opposed.
they may not, but if many of the thinkers and people who understand this stuff are reasonably unanimous, and
Okay, well,
I don't think
All
it's
right,
going to
well,
be an
all right,
issue at
right.
town meeting,
all right,
with
well, we're not
with
going to
the
solve it
exception
here.
of the height, which I think is going to be controversial.
Yeah.
Right.
Were there
You know
any
my
the height
position about
comment?
it, but
Was
there
there any
hasn't really been.
opposition? Was there any opposition related to height that could be addressed, or are we still just moving forward
Well,
as
at
is?
at
Well,
the
it's
public hearing with the
essentially-
planning board, we'll definitely review it, and it's subject to change. The language in the proposed bylaw.
Let me
is
tell you
subject to
what
change.
my
All right,
concern
yeah,
is.
let's,
All
all
right?
right, forget about the
Please.
communication. Let's go to what Woody's,
I've got
useful
two concerns, one of
All
which is height. I think when Steve Bjorklund spoke a week ago, and I could understand his comment about a rectangular box being far preferred to a peaked roof house. That's what his reference point was. By taking the height down to 35 feet, we're basically, I think, incentivizing some people, bad taste maybe, but incentivizing some people to do a squared off rectangular structure, because the third floor would have, by my estimate, and Clark, you're the architect, somewhere between 2 and 3 times as much volume as a peaked roof third floor.
Right, that was one of my points on my diagram, that lowering it provides the flat roof box a volumetric benefit compared to a pitchy roof. And I kind of think that most people in Cohasset, believe that the pitchy roof approach is more attractive than.
Oh, sure. No,
than
no
the
argument.
yeah,
quote, triple
honest-
decker approach.
But that doesn't mean that people won't, if they're dealing with less volume inside,
Right.
won't opt for maybe some hybrid. I mean, and I don't want to get into the architectural issues, which
Yeah.
I don't understand, but you know what I mean, somewhere, some quasi.
Well, I still haven't heard that there's a compelling argument for the change, a real, I mean,
Well,
Tom
could I
said he
bring up
doesn't like
another
it, but
issue? Let me bring up
yeah,
another.
go ahead.
yeah,
Woody.
go ahead.
You have defined height as the top of a peak or a parapet or whatever. Fine, and now you've lowered the height. But what about accessory buildings, garages?
Yeah, same
Garages
problem.
have a midpoint. And are we now saying that the peak of a garage roof
Is the
Yes.
height of the roof.
Yeah, if you looked at my diagrams, it shows that there's a loss of height of 5 feet, as well as in the zoning
Okay.
table. The portion of a building less than 15 feet can be a little closer to the property line.
so that's
You
got to be
deal with that.
lower as well.
Yeah, that would be affected. And basically, there's a preference for a flat roof as well. It squashes, it takes out a 12-12 pitch out of the equation altogether.
Yeah, and I'm really concerned. But anyway,
Judge
go ahead.
Cutler has a,
Wait,
too.
all right, Judge Cutler, go ahead, before I chime in.
I was just gonna say, it seems to me that the debate here is about two things, and one is the shape of roofs and whether one is preferable over another, which is on one side of the equation, and whether people would opt for the square version if they had to measure only to the top of the ridge line. And I know Tom feels very strongly, or I think he does from what he said, about the actual final height of pitched roofs. and that perhaps they're too high now because people just push it to the limit.
Yeah.
Seems to me you're going to be addressing dimensional controls when you get to Article 5. And you could address the height, the actual height issue at that time as to whether or not you can go 35 feet or 35 plus 5. So that if you changed the overall height limit to 32, you might still be allowed to have a 35-foot high pitched roof measuring, 3 feet from the top. I mean, there may be a compromise way of doing this that accomplishes both concerns. That's all I'm suggesting. And we could do that relatively easily.
Well, I think that's a
And-
that's a good
and-
point.
and,
It's just that
Clark,
if we
Clark.
have something now and it's taken away, there has to be a real reason other than Tom
Stop with the
thinks that
taking,
buildings are too high.
stop with the taking away. I'm not gonna.
No, you're taking away
No,
5
what
feet
we,
of height.
okay.
It has a huge impact on the
No,
design
it
of
doesn't.
building.
I don't think we're going, we're not gonna get a rash of flat roof box residential structures. This is an issue perhaps in commercial areas, but not in residential. I
It's
don't
a,
think
it's a
anybody
huge
sitting
issue for
here, I
commercial
don't think
projects.
anybody sitting here thinks that that's going to be a real threat. And and I'm not going to cower to scare tactics brought up by
Well,
developers.
are you gonna
Number
get flat
two,
roof
Number
garages?
Number two, a residential floor, we talked about this at the meeting the other night, residential floor, let's say 10 feet is generous. That's a 3-story building and it's 30 feet. And then you have area for an attic. That is a lot of house.
Tom, but we're changing it. So there has to be a
Yes, because we
serious
also
reason
at this.
why we're taking
we're
away
ta-
or reducing
Why?
homeowners'
All right, let me get
flexibility.
to- The why has been said before at our previous meeting and at the forum. The why is A, common sense, and
No,
B,
it's not. It might be
and
common sense for you,
B,
but you can't
and
say it's common
B-
sense for everyone.
well, I don't really.
It's certainly
I'm
not
worried
for me,
about-
and I am a design
not the-
professional.
I'm not worried about the common sense of a developer. I'll say that flat out. But B, the issue also is at the same time, the community has told us they do not want to see 40-foot high houses all over town.
Uh,
And as
Tom,
Katie
is
said,
it-
Tom,
Katie-
hasn't said that.
Tom, is this anecdotal or do you have evidence?
no, I was just about to say, as Katie pointed
Where?
out, the working group had data that actually very few are pushing the limit. But when the limit is pushed at large home reviews, we have opposition to it. We have opposition going on to it in the village, different thing. And when we deal with
Well,
when we deal with
here-
3A,
Tom, let me just butt in for 1 second. If there was a real reason to take away the privilege
you
of
keep
an
saying,
attic
take away,
for
don't knock yourself out.
homeowners, or maybe people who just wanted to build an attic, maybe they don't have the money to build an attic, but they don't want to give up that privilege. But we're taking it away.
No,
Now,
we're not.
There are
Mark.
ways to compensate for taking away rights by building in some flexibility. And I think at the other night, I mentioned that Milton had a sort of a special permit process, which were I think the exact words were reasonably necessary. So if somebody wanted a functional attic, maybe that would be a reasonably necessary
And that
purpose
is.
for going to the ZBA for a
All right,
special
well,
permit.
First
Duxbury, for example, just let me finish just one more example of how you can mitigate the taking away of rights. And that would be Duxbury in their residential district has if the houses are a certain distance apart, it basically says at an angle, you can go from with an angle above your neighbor's roofs. So it mitigates the kind of like 35 feet to peak only. If you have no house, I mean, the height issue is probably needed most in Residence A, like the village, small lots. But it has the most impact also on those tighter neighborhoods in town.
Yeah,
Big
and
lots, not such a big deal. You're really not going to impact your neighbor if they're 300 feet away. Like me, my closest house to me is 300 something feet.
All right.
well, my concern though is that you're also sweeping in outbuildings and
Yep.
first floor extensions
Right.
close to the lot
And-
line.
and
And I
what's
think
the height-
there you
what's the
may
height
be
limit?
incentivizing flatness.
What's
It
the
is.
height-
It is
what is the
definitely an
height limit
incentive
on
for
an
flat.
outbuilding right now? What is the
What?
height limit? What's the height limit on an
15
outbuilding right
feet
now?
to the peak or.
It-
Yeah.
It's also, you can build closer to the property line. And I'll say, when we reviewed the language that got voted on 3-2, this didn't even come up. I mean, we didn't even discuss it as a committee. I did
Discuss
put it in my diagrams, though, that it affects the portion of a
Well,
building that's.
You
that
guys
could be
can
15 feet.
talk about it a lot. I'm just raising it as a concern because I think people are going to be even more concerned possibly with the height of a garage. I mean, if you're
Yeah,
taking their garage
I
down.
agree.
Are you telling me a 15-foot garage isn't a big enough garage to put 2 cars in? Are you really
think-
telling me
no,
that?
if it's
The
the peak,
bylaw has
it
not
ends up being a
engendered
flat
any
roof.
opposition.
Tom, take a look at my diagram and
I
Dave
did look at your
Garage.
diagrams,
Well,
Clark, and I'm
it's
glad
pretty
you, and I'm
clear.
glad you, I'm
There's a
glad.
Okay.
preference for a
All
flat
right.
roof.
All right,
I
hold on,
raise it
hold on
as
one
a
sec.
concern.
Hold on one sec. Let me let David get in before I say something else. But go ahead, David.
I was just going to ask, by getting the multiple data points at the base versus the 2 that were before, does that mitigate it enough that when we're arguing about to the top or the midpoint of the top, that it's really a moot point? Because if you're grounded by getting the average of those 10 points, how much different is that 35 from the midpoint of that to the actual top? I mean, we could be, could be making a distinction without a difference here, because the reason that it was a big issue before was when you had people cherry picking the 2 points at the base. And so if you have a slanted sloped property, they can cherry pick those, and then they can really get the height out of it. Whereas if you're on flat ground, it's not going to matter. If you're on all these other things, it's not. So to Clark, I guess the question would be the most, because he's the architect, was if you're getting the 10 points of the base, when you're going 35 up, how much different is it going to be to the tip from the midpoint? I mean, to me, it might be negligible. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the average grade, if it's other than these examples where you have a big clump of ledge that's right next to the house that gets incorporated, I think the 2 points was never really made any sense when the language right now says the mean. It just doesn't tell you within 10 feet. It just doesn't tell you how many points to pick. So I think we fixed that way of manipulating the numbers.
Yeah, but Clark, if you're fixing it,
Yeah.
do you have any data that would show that 10% or 80% of the houses that have been built in the last 20 years have used 2 data points? The kind of things I see at the zoning board, I don't think I've ever seen 2 data points used. I've
Well,
seen 10, 15.
Yeah, well, I always use 10-foot intervals. You go 10 feet out and then up against the building and then out 10 feet at a 10-foot space.
If 2 data points is a problem, I would then ask your committee to give town meeting and the citizens the facts and figures there. Say, we want to get away from 2. I
Well,
certainly
that's
am not
why,
paying
I
for
mean,
2 data
Judge
points.
Cutler says 12, at least 12 points. And I think that covers it.
Yeah.
No, it isn't what you're proposing, which
Yeah.
is fine, but what is the problem?
Well,
It
the
always comes
problem
back to what
was
is the problem that we're
580
trying to solve.
Jerusalem Road. 580 Jerusalem Road was the problem, where there was a big chunk of ledge that was
Yeah.
a 10-foot setback.
Okay, so you had one egregious example. I
Yep.
certainly agree that it shouldn't have been allowed and was, but or it shouldn't have. That's
Yep,
the wrong
yep.
word. Not desirable.
Well, the building inspector specifically asked that this be addressed because he's having a difficult time with it.
Yeah,
Because
it
it's
isn't a
not in writing.
proposal. it's what is the problem? And do people then say, okay, if that's the problem, yes, this is a good solution. I think it's a problem for houses, quite possibly, but I don't think it's going to resonate very well with the public if you're talking about messing around with the one-story garage.
Well, I mean, I think that establishing the average grade, pre-construction grade, I don't think it doesn't seem like it's much of an issue. Changing the height from the peak to the midpoint of rafter for 1.5 stories as well as 2.5 stories, it's significant because basically you're making them 1 story instead of 1.5 stories and 2 story instead of 2.5 story. It's significant. It's a significant impact. But establishing the parameters of the grade plane, I don't think it's controversial. I mean, I think we might, when we look at it at the public hearing, we might tweak the language.
I think we
could
need
say
to
at least 12
reconcile-
equidistant points or a minimum of, so that everything's understood.
I think we need to reconcile from what was brought up at that hearing was accessory dwellings and commercial, and to make sure that everything was going to be copacetic with those, because it was asked after the meeting by someone, what about accessory dwellings and also garages, excuse me.
Well, yeah, it's a wrong term. It's not accessory dwelling, it's accessory building.
Yeah, accessory buildings, excuse me. So
Right.
I think we need to chew on that a little bit more to make sure that again, it wouldn't affect that. And the same thing with commercial, you know,
Yeah.
we have to deal with that because they have different needs than residential. So maybe it's something we can, you know,
But that's
dive
when
into.
we-
a little bit.
That's when we deal with Article 5 on what the measurement that we apply to the definition. And as far as Clark, your point about Duxbury and Milton having exceptions, that can be built into Article 4. These things can be addressed, but separate those issues from the definition itself. And the definition is designed so we do not have 40-foot structures in town. Because my 2.5 years now listening to large home reviews, that's what I'm hearing from people. They don't want these things. And that's a 3.5-story building in 35 feet. That's being generous. With a 10-foot story, that's 3.5 floors. And a garage is 1.5 floors. I can't see how that's not plenty. And that's, if we, I guess, well, we'll get to this when we discuss Article 5 about house size, because we will discuss it.
Well,
And
we do have 2.5 stories. We don't actually say 3 stories, but we say 2.5 stories in our dimensional.
Yeah, but we all know
table.
what a story, we all know what a story is. And a
Well,
residential story is rarely 10 feet. And I'm giving
I think that
it the benefit of the doubt to
I
say
think that
it's 10 feet.
homeowners, existing homeowners and future homeowners, I think they kind of have the right to have an attic. I mean,
Nobody's
I'm not
saying
gonna
they
make any
can't.
bones about it. I'm hoping that the language can be perfected perhaps in the planning board hearings, but
I
you know,
have
think that
a
the
house.
point is, it's gonna be controversial. This height issue
It's
will be
walk-
controversial. And Tom,
right.
you can say whatever you want. People are gonna
All right. Well, yeah,
do
when you
whatever
say,
they
when you
want, no
say
matter
taking
what
away
you
rights,
say.
well, when you say take away rights, you're going
Yep,
to.
that's
inflame
right.
this- Well, that's incorrect. You're not
No,
taking away
it's not.
rights.
Yeah,
All right.
that a
Now-
right they currently have, you're removing some of the right people currently have
Okay.
for the future of their property. It affects value of property,
Oh,
and especially in
I
the
wait,
commercial district.
I've been
Wait a
practicing
minute, just
law
let
for
me just make this
38
point, and I've
years
made it
and wait for
before.
the proof that
You-
any of this affects
you
value.
are reducing the building height, so the number of stories in the village in the harbor to 2 stories instead of 3 or 2.5. That's what the geometry does. That's what the 5-foot difference, that's what it makes. It's a reality. And I'm saying that as a design professional. I've reviewed carefully and made careful, realistic diagrams for what I think the impact is.
Tom, would you be willing to wait on the final height determination of how high a building can be of any shape until we get to the dimensional tables? That would eliminate any controversy over this at town meeting, and we could get the clarification on how you measure them. And
Well, the
And-
only advantage of doing that is that to the extent we propose changes on the size of houses, and the large home review process, they'd all be dealt with at the same time.
yeah,
I mean, let me suggest this. Let's go through the select board and the planning board and see what they have to say before we make
Yeah.
that decision.
Mhm.
We have
Because
our meet, Cassandra, is it the 22nd that we meet again? Wednesday, the 22nd?
Let me double check.
if we go through the boards and we need to do more homework on this and get some, you know, better things going, and to couple those changes with the dimensional ones, we can see if that's the case and then go from there.
Mhm.
I feel like we also
So-
had
But-
notes on the previous time we did this, the comments on, we're taking property rights away and I'm not gonna sell my house. Like, I wonder if we put together
Oh my
something that
God.
helps. No, I agree with you, Tom, but is there a way to, mediate those concerns
Is
in
it
a
maybe-
way,
Well,
like refuting them, just as like a lesson learned? I don't know if we ever did that, and I'm afraid they're just gonna come up again and.
no, I
Yeah.
get it, and I have a problem. as
I
a-
have to run, so I'm going to check out right now.
All
but
right,
I will
thank
catch
you,
up with you
David.
later. Okay,
David.
bye-bye.
All right.
All right, well,
Hold on. hold on a second.
now that I've started,
Well, is it-
stimulating
let-
your
let- yeah, let's
thinking.
forget this one. Let's forget this. Woody, is
Can
there
I,
any?
can I bring up one other issue? And
Yes,
this,
please.
this was an issue that I initially, after I talked to Judge Cutler, bought into what she's saying, but I don't any longer. And let me explain it. It's the last sentence of 12.5 introductory paragraph, as well as a direct conflict in 4.2. At town meeting less than 2 years ago, we passed an amendment that tried to address a lot of the gaps or voids in our table of use regulations, which were last written up in 1975 before the computer was invented, just as a frame of reference. And so we said, basically, look, we've had a couple of examples where the bylaw was silent on uses, but practical considerations made approval seem sensible. I will take 2 examples very quickly. Crazy Paws, a vet downtown. It was a pre-existing non-conforming use. They wanted to move to the highway because of parking, among other things. And of course, a veterinarian practice was not even mentioned in our bylaws. Consequently, it would have required a variance, except that the state law says if you, absent anything else, if you are silent on a use, you can't apply a variance, cannot use a variance. A use is not allowed. If it's not
no, these
mentioned. in the
variances are available if the bylaw allows for it.
Right, but the bylaw didn't, because it didn't talk about veterinary practices. It talked about kennels, it talked about dog groomers, but it didn't talk about an animal doctor. So we had to go to the Attorney General's office. Finally, we passed an amendment to change the table of use regulations, but it took 2 years. We had another example recently, whether you like it or not, an auto body shop right across from the Catholic Church burned down. And in its place, it was a pre-existing use, so it could be reconstructed. You could have a nice new auto body shop and paint shop. Or the owner proposed to do 3 professional offices in the first floor, mixed use, and 3 residences, apartments on the second floor. It was the zoning board's opinion, basically, that this was a much more benign use. It's a new use, but it's a benign use as opposed to restoring an auto body shop in a residential district. But technically, it's not allowed. Although, I don't know, we did find a way to approve it, but I don't like approving by running around the, in the back there. And so when we passed this bylaw, it was addressing a mistake made back in 2002. And it was that last sentence that of the introductory paragraph of 12.5. It was intended to be a new sentence replacing the old 4.2, which is where it belonged in the first place. That's our use section. And it basically says if the use is not mentioned, a special permit can deal with it. If it's prohibited, you're going to need a variance. Perfectly good, to my mind, solution, because if there isn't sort of unique topography, et cetera, you're not going to get a variance anyway. And if it isn't mentioned, it may not be mentioned simply because such a use was never envisioned. Or, well, the table use, and Judge Cutler would agree with me in this, I know, is a real mess. I mean, it was done.
Woody, did the language come out of the draft? I mean,
It was
Well,
put in
no,
the wrong place.
It's
we-
been moved.
I
okay,
think
been
I
moved.
need to explain this, okay? This is important. This is
Yeah.
something that was in my diagnostic report that I pointed out. A special permit for unspecified uses has been invalidated in other communities. There are two reasons for it. Number one, special permits under Section 9, Chapter 40A, it says a town can allow uses by special permit, but they have to be specific uses, not just any use by special permit. It has to say specific uses are allowed by special permit. That's number one. And the second thing is the uniformity clause of Chapter 40A, Section 4 requires that every property within a particular zoning district has to be treated the same way as every other property. When you allow a board, whether it's the planning board or the zoning board of appeals, to just simply decide whether a particular use that's not mentioned in the bylaw is a good idea or bad idea, you're violating those, and you're also creating a situation where they're bypassing town meeting and substituting the opinion of a board for what town meeting has done. And so sometimes town meeting makes a mistake or doesn't cover something, and I get it. What we're hoping is, I think, as we go forward, what I would like to see as we get into the use regulations is rather than having very teeny tiny specific listed uses, having much broader characterizations of uses that are defined. So that we can say a retail use is X, and it's a very broad definition. And then we can give examples of retail uses. If we want to break it down, we can say large scale retail and small scale retail. Or we can say service uses and describe what those are and whether they're personal service or business service.
I'm
And
entirely on board with that, but we
Okay.
don't have it yet. And
we
here's
don't have it
here's
yet.
my problem. Less than 2 years ago, the Attorney General did approve the wording that the town meeting approved.
of
And
a use variance.
for special permits and use variances or use special permits. So
No,
how
the
did it
special
get?
permit language was already in there, Woody.
But the use
added
variance
the
was the
use
new
variance.
language that we had.
The
Yeah.
new language.
The
That was
new
brand
language,
new.
the use variance language was brand new, but the special permit language was already in there.
Where? It wasn't in 12.5. Well, why did the Attorney General approve it?
Well, he'd approve a use variance.
He also approved to use special permits.
Well, that was years
Or
ago.
she, or-
That was,
It was 2 years ago. It was less than 2 years ago, 2021.
Yeah,
not
that was
that language.
drive-through town meeting, right? The one at the music circus.
It was-
I don't
All the
remember.
zoning,
We've had.
all
two
the
of them.
zoning passed
Let me-
unanimously.
Let me look back and see, but my recollection was that the use variance provision was added 2 years ago, but that
Yeah.
the special permit language was already there and it was modifying that special permit language.
So the use variance language is staying.
The use variance language is staying, that is
Okay.
still allowed.
Yeah.
I think what we're asking, Woody, is that you be patient until the fall. How
Well, but
many of
there's
these
no guarantee. There's no guarantee that
activities-
we may go another year or two. I believe, and I don't know if I have the
Well,
old.
It
I
hasn't
don't
made
want to
it
take
into
the
the,
time now.
It's up to
I
the
think
planning
special
board.
permit was a new wording.
it hasn't made it into the E code 360 yet, probably. Because it's only 2 years. It takes, for some reason, it's taking a
Well,
long time.
it was put in incorrectly in any event.
Oh,
Whatever
God,
was
no.
that, it was put in incorrectly. Yes, we had to undo it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
words for zoning bylaws, words matter. They have to be the right words in the right place.
yeah. So Woody, my concern is this. It is my strong opinion, based upon my knowledge and my past experience, that if you put that language in, because we are recodifying and rewriting, it will get looked at by the Attorney General. And in my opinion, it will be struck out, or at the very least, you will get a warning that it's vulnerable to legal
Well,
challenge.
How would they rationalize, however, their
I
approval?
just
of this?
explained why.
What?
It wasn't, they didn't necessarily approve that sentence. That may already have been in there for a long time.
I see. All right. Why don't we park that one for tonight? You get, if you can find the language, great. I can look it up as well. Well, I've been wrong as often as I'm right.
Right, the
but-
case law, I'm thinking of maybe was in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Or the Attorney General may have missed it. I don't know. I
Well,
just
They
know what
may
the
have,
case
but it
law-
was a separate article that went to them just as the.
Yeah, but they
sentence
make
was
mistakes
found.
too, Woody.
How could they have missed it? I wonder.
They make
Can we get-
mistakes too.
Can we get a copy of this for our planning board meeting on Wednesday? The actual language that got passed on the floor of town meeting.
I think I
at
had,
drive-through
I
town
think
meeting
I
2 years ago.
I have an email that I can send to you. I think I'd sent it to
Well,
Tom.
I think two things, Clark. I would
Yeah.
like to see the language that existed prior to the 2021 town meeting, and then the language that was passed in the 2021 town.
Right.
I
meeting.
think I have that in the email.
The
that I can
previous
send.
should still be in the E code 360 under 12 point.
Probably not, but, all right, the
12
other,
point.
Okay, I'm just saying, it would
Or-
make life a lot easier until, and I agree with Judge Cutler, the more you can generalize uses and not be so vague, but generalize, all the better. And then I know
well,
the zoning board would
that's the
prefer
point
that.
that was the point she was making about the fall, and this goes back to our discussions in the working group. We all agree that the table in Article 4 has
Right.
got to be
Needs-
changed.
So my
Needs
recommendation
updating.
is leave this alone for 6 months and let's make the change along with the uses that
I
are
can't recommend that.
defined.
We're-
We can't
we're-
recommend that.
we're getting to a point where, it had been discussed a long time ago to not try to do the entire bylaw at one sitting, but we're getting to that point if we keep kicking the can down the road.
Well, you're doing a piece of a bylaw here.
Right, because everybody said, let's do a piece, and that the town couldn't swallow doing the whole thing at once. But if we keep kicking cans down the road, that's where
We
we'll
aren't
be.
gonna do it at once. That's what's gonna happen. Woody, I will look into it again, but I think that whether the Attorney General passed it or not, I don't believe it would pass again, and I don't think it would withstand a challenge in court. And I think on that basis, town council would not be able to recommend in favor of it.
Yeah, this is one of those strict legal things that I think we gotta rely on counsel here, quite a bit, but anyway,
Well, I'm just.
It's not a win-lose situation. It seems like it's win-win to have the use variance language clearly in our zoning bylaw.
it
Yeah,
is in
and
there.
this was, all I can say is that I know we had a different town council, but this was the subject of a lot of discussions, and town council then agreed with this wording. And it's been less than 2 years. So what I don't understand is if case law or something changed in 1989, I mean,
Well,
this, I would leave it alone.
I think there was a knee-jerk reaction 2 years ago to just return what Sturdy got taken out in 2002.
Right.
Yeah,
And the language in 2002 may have been flawed, and again, we all know nobody really looked at this bylaw comprehensively and for strict legal compliance for years, because everybody said, oh, it's perfect as written.
No, we
So
just didn't
I-
want to
I
repeat
think-
the problem we had with the crazy paws thing.
Well, yeah, and we've all agreed since day one of the working group to change the table to make it simpler and not have those kind of crazy loopholes that Crazy Paws had to go and deal with. You know, to simplify the table. And frankly, if we simplify it enough, we won't need use variances. And
well,
use
no,
special
I
permits.
would, that's what I'm proposing is you leave it alone for now, change the use table when you're ready. And if it looks like it's gonna work, just take this out then, but leave it for now. Rather than deal with a small piece of use, and you're gonna come back in 6 months and we're gonna say it isn't even needed, or we took it out because it
No,
wasn't.
well, I would keep the language just in case in the future, but I think in the practical world, what if we very much simplify the table of uses, it won't need to be resorted to.
Exactly. I would be very much in favor.
I would
at
never,
that
I would
point.
never eliminate it, because I think you need it for the whatever flexibility we may
Well, I
need.
don't know. I mean, I think here I would side with Judge Cutler and I would take it out at that point. Once the table of use thing is before the town and they buy into the notion of more generalized or liberalized use, I'd be happy to say we don't need this provision or sub-provision or whatever we want to call it anymore. But I do believe we need it now.
All right, we'll leave this. Judge Cutler, you know what you need to look at again, look at it again, and,
And again, I will write a memo for you if you wish.
yeah, and to the extent the planning board's gonna be swayed by some of this, have this ready, unfortunately, for
Well,
Wednesday
You
night.
know, I think you also have to think of when town meeting votes for a particular bylaw that allows certain uses in a particular district. I don't believe the town is thinking that anybody can come along and say, well, you know what, none of those uses really fit me. And I want to do something else. And I don't want to have to go to town meeting for approval. So I can just get a special permit. I don't even need as
But doesn't
strict
that what-
a standard as a variance. I think that's also something that town meeting may not be happy with.
Well, and doesn't 12.5, if I had it just up on the screen, but doesn't 12.5 actually say that a special permit is available?
Currently it does.
No, this is the draft that's off the town, this is bylaw committee's website. This is the current draft for Article 12.
No, that relates to when the zoning bylaw authorizes the board to grant a special permit for a particular use.
For
at the
particular
development.
use, right, okay.
Right now in the bylaws that exist, 12.4 is special permits, 12.5 is variances.
Yeah.
So you've changed things around,
Yeah,
Well, it's
but I mean,
rearranged.
renumbered.
Yeah,
Right, but the point that I'm trying to make is towns are allowed to require special permits for specific uses. Specific uses, not any use. And that's the problem. You can't have this open-ended special permit availability. It's got to be tied to something that is identifiable, that it's like saying the zoning district boundary is somewhere and we'll decide whether we move it or not. You just can't leave that open-endedness.
Could you
board.
change this possibly to say a variance may authorize a use not otherwise addressed in the bylaws as well as a use specifically prohibited?
Well, that's what it says. You can vary the use regulations in any way that you need to.
Where is that on the draft here?
All right, if you look at section 12,
hold on, let me get it up here again. I was just about to pull up the existing 12.4 to show if it's.
12.6,
All right, so
12.6.
12 points, yeah, hold on.
all right, in accordance with 40A Section 10, the Zoning
Okay.
Board of Appeals has the power to grant a variance from applicable terms of the zoning bylaw, including use regulations. Okay, with respect
Okay.
to land or structures, with respect to particular land or structures, where the board finds. And there you have to make the findings that are required by the statute. You can't alter those.
Yeah, and
But
this, and soil conditions, shape and topography is
Of the land, right,
problematic.
but the land or structures, I
variance.
mean, that'll always be problematic, no matter what you're talking about. But the land or structures, it's not just land. So it could be a particular building is unsuited for the uses that the bylaw particularly allows. And so
And
use
that would fall under what, shape?
that's shape or of the structures.
Shape of a structure. So, because obviously soil conditions wouldn't apply.
Right. No,
But
the shape
topography
of the
wouldn't.
structure. Yeah.
Well, topography might apply, but
But
Right,
that would,
right, right.
more remotely.
but that
Right.
would drive the consideration of a variance for reasons other than the uses that are allowed.
In
Yeah.
other words,
I mean, the
yeah.
straight up variance language, you got to have something weird about the property, right?
And there you still have to have something weird about, not weird, but something that's
I'm trying
that's
to
unique,
Something
dumb it
unique
down
to the
for,
property.
unique about the property that makes it impossible for someone to economically use their land the way the bylaw has said they should use it. So
But how
whether
is that-
it's,
but if it's a use that hasn't been anticipated and it's not covered and it's in
Then you
the
wouldn't-
table, then it
then
doesn't give any flexibility. It's a variance for
it does.
land
gives it
form
flex-
and condition,
know,
not
It gives
for use.
flexibility for a particular structure. You couldn't build something new on the site unless, I don't know, maybe it was a bog and the only thing you can do is some kind of a, I don't know, wine cellar or something, and you don't allow those. Maybe that, in other words, you have to demonstrate to the Zoning Board of Appeals, I can't economically use my property now to any of the uses that you've got listed in the table. Not that it would be more preferable or the neighbors might like it better. That's not a matter of consideration. What's consideration is town meeting has voted to allow particular uses in each zoning district. And so you don't vary that unless it's an extraordinary situation where nobody could use that land for what it's zoned for. The building or the land. I mean, and it's supposed to be a really strict standard. Now, having said that, you can allow all kinds of uses by special permit. You can have categories of uses that are allowed by special permit, but they have to be identifiable.
Or identified in the table.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Now, if you have a broad category, let's say you have a category of repair shops, and we've defined it in a certain way, and it's really unclear whether somebody coming in with a computer repair situation falls into that category. That would be a call, first of all, by the building inspector, and second of all, by the Board of Appeals. So that's an interpretation as to whether something that's being proposed fits into one of those broader categories. It's not changing the category.
So
It's
the
not
term
changing
variance,
the-
so the term variance for uses in the way that we've been thinking about it, where the table didn't have a veterinary clinic, but it did have like a stable for housing animals. We had to change the bylaw. This doesn't,
We didn't.
the use variance doesn't help us.
Well, no, the use variance helps if somebody comes in, let's say for the sake of argument that you've got a church sitting in a residential district. And it's a structure that would be extraordinarily uneconomic to try and convert to a single family house, which is the only thing that's allowed in that district. but the church has been abandoned. They can't find any buyers. Nobody goes to church anymore. Nobody wants a church. They come to the zoning board of appeals and they say, we think this, we want to use this for doctor's offices, or we want to use this for a concert hall, or whatever other idea somebody has come up with. They could go to the zoning board of appeals and say, I've got this unusual shaped building. This size and the shape isn't usable for what you allow in the district. This is unique. Nobody else in the district has this same building. Can you give me a variance? That would be something that the board can entertain. An abandoned school building that they want to convert to multifamily housing, or they
Right.
want to, you know, there's things, that's what it's there for.
Right, as opposed to the fact that the table doesn't have a specific use that somebody wants to do.
It could be on the table,
Sure.
maybe it's not on the table.
Right,
you
if
know,
it's not on the
it
table,
matters.
then it's not gonna happen. So
Oh, it could happen
I
if
don't
it's
know,
not.
I just, I guess I'm getting closer to getting it, but I'm not sure that what we're doing is gonna solve the problem that we had with the veterinary clinic.
No, what's going to solve the problem with the
Transfer the table.
veterinary clinic is you are going to examine what uses should be allowed in the district,
right.
what broad categories.
Yes,
And if you don't, you're always going to miss something, okay?
Okay,
Things
of course,
change over
yeah.
time. But sometimes you might look at a property and everybody says, you know, what would be really good on that corner would be an ice cream store. But stores aren't allowed in that district. Well, the way to change it is you go to town meeting and you change it to allow it. It's not just because we'd like to see it there, because
okay,
over
no,
time,
I
people-
understand, it's just that we had this problem, and it seemed unfortunate that the owner had to wait a couple of years to get it together on the floor of town meeting. And it would be great to have that option, but if it doesn't exist other than, and then establishing a comprehensive and updated table of uses, then that's just the way it is.
with your broader use categories, if something isn't specifically listed in a category that's permitted,
Right,
but seems to be like those things,
okay,
okay? Then you have a situation where you go to the building inspector, you say to the building inspector, I've got a veterinary, it's, you know, that's not named or not listed, but it fits into the description that we have here of medical services, and you allow medical services in the district. I
Yeah.
would like to put a veterinary there. The building inspector says yes or no, I agree or disagree. If he disagrees, you can then go to the zoning board of appeals and make your pitch to the zoning board of appeals. My
Of
use
course.
fits into a category.
But in order to
Yeah,
make
and-
that pitch, you have to say, I can't really use the property. at all."
No. That's, I'm talking about when we change the use categories.
Oh, yeah, when we do, but when I'm on board.
but in
Right
between now
now.
and then,
It's in
You're-
between.
the-
For the
we
next
we don't
6
have any
months.
transition element.
Right,
And-
for the next
well-
6 months, if you don't like the uses that are there and you want something else, you're gonna have to wait.
And,
So
in-
we-
and by the way, for 20 years, after Sturdy slipped this through at town meeting, the use variance just disappeared by an amendment on the floor, Judge Cutler. It was interesting, but, you know, we had this one situation with Crazy Paws, but really the sky didn't fall in for 20 years. And I think we can deal with this in 6 months. And yes, and you know, what I had put together is broad categories of uses. So for example, retail. Well, retail could cover the ice cream shop. It could cover the convenience store. It can cover a lot of things and gives us a lot of flexibility, because I'm the believer, because of where we're located and how far over the highway, we're in a beggars can't be choosers category. We need to make it easy for commercial enterprises to locate and operate here. And that's what we're heading towards. And we talked about this on the working group for 2 years, and we all agreed that that's the direction to go, not the laundry list we have
Right.
now.
What all prospective developers want is as much certainty as possible. What can I do as of right? If it's clear and not everything has to be negotiated all the time for, with every board, then
It's
that's
not gonna be that.
fair, and that provides encouragement for additional commercial interests in
Right?
Cohasset.
And then that's not what, that's
But we're
not
not
what we're,
talking about how to make that happen yet.
no, but that's for the fall
We'll
and
be
that's
talking
not,
about it
and
this
that's
spring.
not,
I would say, why don't we wait until you've actually done that work and it's passed or is passing with very little opposition, then get rid of the offending language. But there's all sorts of stuff. You're not allowed to sell Christmas trees downtown, but we do.
And
So and so
that needs
forth.
to be taken care of as a
I know it
temporary.
does.
it's a
Woody,
flag.
Woody's advocating for a interim,
Yes,
measure,
something interim to help us get through this
a
issue of
flexible.
hardship and everything else that has to
well,
be.
again, you quizzed us on height about what's the problem? What is the problem of doing this and living with it for 6 months? What problem are we trying to solve? Who's out there on the horizon? That
I don't
wants-
know.
Well, again, I don't think I don't think it's a problem. And if we're doing something if we have a bylaw that is not legally permitted, I suggest we have to get rid of it, and as soon as possible. Where's?
All right, I would just simply do it as a package and not piecemeal.
All
And I
right,
think
hold
this is a
on.
piecemeal fix.
Well,
I
again, this
wouldn't argue
was
with
the
you.
whole idea of splitting up, dealing with
if
the
coun-
bylaw.
If council's telling us it's a dysfunctional element that we currently have, that we thought was gonna work and we didn't think it through and we didn't get good advice at the time, well, so be it. I think Tom's point, it's 6 months. What's the big deal?
By the way, on the screen, can everybody see? Am I sharing it? I'm sorry. maybe I'm
Did
not.
everyone notice I agreed with Tom on this?
Yeah,
Anyone notice
I just
that?
got
Yeah,
voted for.
But
Anyone?
no,
I noticed
no, Clark,
I
that
did.
was that was your evil twin brother.
I don't have a twin brother.
hold
I have
on
a
a
sister.
second.
I have a sister though. Anyway.
Hold on a second.
can
I'm
we-
trying to so 4.3A is what we're deleting, correct, Judge?
Correct.
All right, so it says uses permitted by right or by special permit shall be subject blah, 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 blah. Okay, so the use has to be permitted by special permit, and if our language is not saying that, even 4.3 says that, and we're just moving it to where it should be, council's opinion, and we still can't just go willy-nilly. Even 4.3A doesn't say that we can go willy-nilly. It does say it has to be a use permitted by special permit. So, I don't know what we're arguing here that is going to be a crisis for 6 months.
Well, Woody has said that this example came up and the table's outdated. So I guess the point is maybe we should just move on.
Well, long ago you saw the proposed table, and everybody should contribute ideas to that table.
Of course.
towards-
So
towards
maybe we should just move on.
simplifying. Yeah, all right.
I hate to think that we believe something that wasn't true from a
Yeah.
zoning perspective, but okay.
All right, I'll be happier if I can see the language. That was
All right, well,
approved and the
That would be
language
great.
is in
I
place.
agree.
I'm gonna send it to you.
Woody, can you be at the discussion on Wednesday?
No, I've got another meeting, unfortunately,
All
same
right,
time.
all right, well, we
No,
will
I would,
represent,
I
we
mean,
will faithfully represent your position.
but what I'm trying to do, it may not sound it, but what I'm trying to do is to line up behind what you guys are recommending and pointing out a few areas that give me angst, but keep at it. So
I have to tell you, it's much appreciated because very few people have taken the time to look through it
Absolutely.
and give us a 3-page memo like that, and I appreciate that very much. As I said to you, I wish you were still part of this group. By the way, who is HS on this screen? In our meeting?
Human Services?
I don't know.
I assume it's a member of the public.
Oh. I just wonder how they got promoted, but that's all right. Fine.
It's not a webinar, it's just a meeting, so anybody can be.
Oh, all right, that's fine. All right, no problem. Just want to know who it was. All right, any other points, Woody, before we let you go?
No, I think everything else was either, explained well, as you would expect by Judge Cutler, and I, withdrew my concerns and objections, really. I mean, I think this is.
All right, well, always appreciate it, and we'll see you on the 15th, I guess, is the
I
plan.
guess with the zoning board, sure.
Judge Cutler, I don't know if that's available on your calendar, Wednesday, the 15th. But
Wednesday, the 15th for Zoom meeting, is that?
yeah,
Wednesday, the
yeah,
15th is advisory,
I'm sorry, Wednesday, the 15th is, when is zoning?
the 21st.
Zoning is the Tuesday, the 21st. Advisory, I'm not concerned about as
Okay.
much as, given Woody's comments, Judge Cutler, if you could be at the zoning board one, that's the 21st.
Tuesday, the Tuesday?
Yes.
Yes, it's Tuesday. We meet.
Thursday?
But Tom, you definitely want me at those meetings
can't do
to
it
provide the
Thursdays. It's
opposing
Tuesday?
position on height.
Certainly welcome to come, Clark. I can certainly represent your position. But, all right, so if we're done with this part of it, again, so for the schedule, tomorrow night is the select board. I think it's at something like 8 o'clock. And I'm getting the impression it's not going to be super detailed, but it's just the formality of them sending the articles over to the planning board. Planning
They're
board
not-
is,
They're not
Planning-
making a recommendation yet
I'm
until after
going,
planning board does?
I don't know what they're gonna do. I'm gonna certainly ask them to do that, but if they want to wait, that's up to them. If they want to wait to planning board and advisory, that's up to them.
Well, typically they wait till the language is 100% finalized and as a part of the public hearing process.
Yeah, all right, well,
So
again, we'll leave it
I
to
mean,
them.
unless you think that there's no part of the planning board process that could change any of the language
Oh,
in any
The
of these
whole
sections.
purpose of the planning board process is to review it and it may well result in changes.
I understand
mean,
that, and that's why I'm making the point.
you
Yeah,
know,
all right, well, again, that's their call when they want to make their recommendations, so. The planning board is a hybrid meeting like the forum was on Wednesday at 6:30. And Judge Cutler will be presenting it rather than myself or Clark. And then we have, I guess now the advisory's been set. It's for Wednesday, the 15th. And zoning will be the 21st. I was also invited to the Alternative Energy Committee for Thursday, so I got like 4 meetings this week. And that was to discuss, again, we had all agreed that articles 19 and 20 are being put off to the fall. They just want to understand clearly the difference between the diagnostic recommendations and my proposals, and there seem to be some confusion about what they're dealing with, but that's regarding the fall articles, and we can, if I can get a lot of that out of the way at this meeting in March, that's fine. All right, we will not be discussing village parking tonight. Jack's not here, not fair, but I tried to bring it up last time and I was going to bring it up formally this time, but we won't discuss.
I'll make a motion. We accept your meeting minutes from the 2 meetings that you sent over a little while ago.
Yeah, was there any other, well, before we get to that, any other thoughts?
I have
feedback?
one thing that I really need to talk to you guys about. So I don't know if you saw my summary.
Yeah.
Okay. As I was writing the summary of the site plan review, I realized that there was a slip between the cup and the lip when we drafted the site plan requirements. And we had said that one of the things that would trigger site plan review would be the addition of a new building, fine, or a substantial alteration of a building or group of buildings. And we had said that results in an increase of 500 square feet for 10% of the existing area, whichever is less, and it should have said more.
My copy
Otherwise, you
says-
have to.
My
Hmm?
copy says more.
Well, my summary says more. I have to change that unless you all agree.
Oh, yeah.
That what we meant was or more instead of or less, because if you say or less, then you're talking about a 50 square foot addition
No,
requiring site plan approval, which would just drive everyone crazy,
that doesn't make any
Right.
sense. So, yeah.
right?
Right.
Okay, so we'll
All right,
put in.
does that need, whatever needs amending, let's amend.
Right, so that's just
because
one
it's
word
gonna-
that needs to be, I'll send it to you, Cassandra, so that you can just make that change in Article 12. Okay, so that, all right, if everybody's happy with that, and then the other thing that I just wanted to make sure of, my plan, because I really, as town council, can't promote any changes. So I'm going to do a very straightforward explanation summarizing what the changes will be and answering questions. If you think that we need more explanation, Tom, about the height or whatever, I think somebody who wants to promote a
Yeah,
particular point
I
of
think-
view needs to be able to speak.
Yeah. Well, I wanted you to present it solely to anticipate if somebody said, well, why is Callahan presenting to his own board and then he's gonna vote on it?
Oh,
Right.
no, yeah.
But obviously, as members of this committee, we are advocates for this. I intend to be an advocate. So
Yeah.
I think Clark and I will certainly be able to handle the debate
Okay.
on Wednesday between the two of
Okay.
us.
Do you
Won't
think we could, will the building inspector
It's
be
just
there?
on height.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know if he will be there, Cassie. Maybe we should invite him, please, if you could. I mean, Cassandra, I'm sorry, Cassie.
He is always invited, but I don't know if he will be there or not.
Well,
I'll
maybe
tell
we
you,
can
he
stro-
would be
maybe we
helpful
can
on
strongly
height.
suggest he should be at this one.
You know, the height discussion, it was really he who said that he found it a very difficult definition and it was hard to figure out how to measure things. And so it would be really helpful if he could be there to assist. Possible. Do you want me to talk to him or?
I can definitely let him know that his
Okay.
presence is wanted. But
Yeah,
I,
will-
Yell across
can't
the
force him.
hallway. Hey, John.
No, I'm probably also gonna see him tomorrow because I think he's participating in this interview for a planner candidate that I have to participate in. So I'll mention it to him. But yes,
We're talking about which meeting? I'm sorry.
for the.
Planning
we-
board.
And I'm
we
gonna
think- we
sign
think
off.
John
That's
Harron
very
should-
All right.
He
Okay,
should be at the planning.
I've already
board.
caused enough trouble, so now it's time for me to.
All right, Woody, please, everything you
Bye-bye.
do is, everything you do is
No,
much
no, no,
appreciated.
no.
all
Thank
right?
you, Woody.
All among friends, all right.
Okay.
Bye.
cause trouble,
Nice.
Woody. That's what
I
you're here.
did. You.
Ah,
All
he
right,
checked.
so, Jack, you joined after we finished everything. Perfect timing. You can help us.
No,
you can
no,
help-
he has to vote on the
What?
meeting minutes.
No, yeah, I know. He's gonna get us to vote on the minutes and to adjourn, so, let's just do them separately. The minutes of, February 1. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Minutes of February 22nd.
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor, 5-0. Thank you. Anything else before we adjourn?
I just want to clarify the role of a select board advisory committee. It is to advise the select board. So if you're saying that you want to advocate, I'd have to think it through as how we can properly do that while being consistent with the charge. I'm not saying we shouldn't be, but I think and maybe
Let's not
Tom,
over-
I can
Let's
speak
not
up.
overthink the word. I'm talking about being an advocate and we're the ones promoting the article to the town meeting. Somebody has to present it and promote it. That's it. That's all I mean. I'm not cheerleading it. That's what we are here for. We are here to be the quarterback of this function. All right. While you're here, though, it came up just before you got on. What are you anticipating your board doing tomorrow night? Do you intend to recommend or waiting till advisory and planning?
We would like to hear. This is your opportunity to report to the creating board, which is a select board who created this, to advise them. So tomorrow night, you should advise them as to what your conclusions were.
All right.
Well, and typically on the planning board public hearing, that all the bylaws are subject to tweaking, modification, perfection.
Are you
As a
planning
part
to
of the
vote to
public
recommend? Are you planning to vote to
process.
recommend or anything tomorrow? Or are you going to wait for planning and advisory to weigh in? That, yes or no?
That will be whether or not, yeah, yes, sir, excuse me. Judge Cutler, I think wants to be a judge. He's, so could you give him some hints?
I tried
Eddie.
once.
Tom applied for judgeship.
I applied a long time ago. Now I'm too old to begin the training. They wouldn't hire me now because I'd be out in 6 years, but less than that. So anyway, that I digress, but
The selectmen-
anyway,
the
that will
selectmen
be-
will forward the articles to the planning board for the next night, right?
yeah,
Right.
they have, the only thing you really have to do tomorrow night, Jack, is vote to send the articles to the planning board.
I know.
You don't
Yeah,
have,
we
you
can
don't
do
need a
that.
recommendation. If you want to
Right.
wait.
Frequently, the board sometimes has mixed opinions whether they want to weigh in before other boards have done that. So we'll see how it goes tomorrow.
Your call, whatever you want to
Yeah.
do. All right, I'll entertain, unless there's anything else that anyone wants to discuss, so entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
It's been
moved.
a long meeting, so I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah. Appreciate it. All right, so adjourn. What time is it? 7:46. All in favor?
Mark Brewer, aye.
Cassie, you and I'm assuming you are.
See you Wednesday.
All
Yeah.
right, see you
Bye now.
Wednesday. Thank you, Judge
Thanks,
Cutler.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
Cassandra.
you.
Thank you, HS,
Thank
whoever
you.
you are.
Good
Thank
night.
you, Judge Cutler.
All right, bye-bye.
Good night.
I don't.